that yes, USC made a splash higher. You know, there could be football coaches out there that are just as good as Lincoln Riley, but they don't have the the entertainment value, the brand name, and didn't accomplish what he did at Oklahoma. So they get a big name coach for a big brand program in Hollywood where you're competing against the Lakers and the Dodgers in the NFL. So here we go with George Kliavkoff, the new Pac-12 commissioner, who's now one season into his tenure. And I think based on what I read about him once he took the job, he was not a candidate according to the media. Nobody thought of him as being a candidate. Once he was, you review what he has accomplished and you get the idea what the Pac-12 is going for. And I think, you know, time will tell, but I think it was worth the risk, the chance that they took to get somebody in there that understands media, marketing, entertainment, and Kliavkoff now seems to be like-minded with USC, and they could become good partners going forward.
Absolutely, Mark. There was a piece earlier this week, and it flows from actual events. But John Wilner, again, the guy who has his finger on the pulse of the Pac-12, wrote a piece. But like we at Trojans Wire, we noticed what George Kliavkoff did right after the Caleb Williams transfer announcement. Kliavkoff was pretty quick to tweet, "Hey, this is a game changer for the conference." Like he gets out there saying, "Hey, it's great for our football brand that this transfer happened. It's great that USC has such an elite quarterback, such an elite player." Like George Kliavkoff was out in front on this. He didn't wait. He was proactive, very robustly supportive of both USC, the bell cow of the Pac-12, and the conference as a whole. Can you imagine Larry Scott even attempting to do this? And even if you were to say yes, maybe Larry Scott would have tried to do this. Although, like since when did he do anything when Kayvon Thibodeau went to Oregon? Something on that scale. He didn't, silence, crickets from him. But even if Scott had tried to do something like this when he was Pac-12 commissioner, to do it as smoothly and as confidently as George Kliavkoff did, I mean, there's a certain relaxed, self-assured quality to Kliavkoff's tweets. I'm not talking about the man; I've never met him, but just observing and how he communicates, there's such a vibe of easy confidence. And boy, that's such a for the Pac-12, but especially for USC now in this age of Lincoln Riley. Like that's the kind of just calm, confident leadership that people have been waiting for, not only in the Pac-12 but especially at USC, where the fan base always thought that Larry Scott didn't lift a finger to help USC, to protect USC. Certainly in terms of scheduling, like you might remember during the Sam Darnold years that USC had to play a game against Texas, which was an ESPN ABC Saturday Night Football featured game. Then the next week, USC plays a short week in Pullman at Washington State and loses. So, like, that was Larry Scott in the Pac-12 office in San Francisco setting up USC to fail, when, of course, it should be exactly the opposite. You set up USC to succeed. Like, does the SEC put Alabama on a Friday after the LSU game? Like, that would be the comparison. Or Ohio State on a Friday after a Michigan State game, something like that. Like that would never ever happen. But the Pac-12 and Larry Scott continued to set up USC to fail. So here with George Kliavkoff immediately tweeting about Caleb Williams and how awesome this is, and how Pac-12 social media accounts. This is something John Wilner explained in his piece. They were all lined up. They were in sync. They were all promoting. So like, hey, there's actual leadership going on. There's actual coordination going on. There's actual marketing of football going on. And for just as kind of the backstory, before Larry Scott, we had Tom Hansen as the commissioner of the Pac-10 from 1983 through 2009. When Scott succeeded him, and Tom Hansen was so much in the same vein as Larry Scott. Promoted the Olympic sports, promoted the participation sports, where of course the Pac-12 cleans up. I mean, we're during the Olympics, and USC, Stanford, Cal, have been great Olympic schools the whole way, but like football is the deal. And certainly in the modern age, you need to be promoting your football brand. And so we've had, almost 40 years between Tom Hansen and Larry Scott of not really making football first priority on so many levels. And then here we are, not even a year into George Kliavkoff's tenure as Pac-12 commissioner, and just this Caleb Williams episode with coordinated, instant, confident, aggressive promotion within the first few hours. It didn't even take days, just hours after it happened. Like, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what it's supposed to be. This is what it means when a commissioner at the helm of a Power Five conference is serious about football. And George Kliavkoff could say until the cows came home that he wanted to promote, that he wanted to make football better. Larry Scott, paid lip service to those kinds of things. But this is what it looks like to actually deliver. This is what it looks like to actually follow through and show your commitment to the football product and to USC being the center of that football product. So, it might seem cosmetic to some people. And of course, we're going to have Pac-12 football media rights negotiations in about a year from now. That's going to be a really important test of Kliavkoff. But looking at everything that we're seeing out here from the new commish, it certainly appears that he gets it. He's right on top of this. He understands the Pac-12s need to be good in football, and he understands USC's need to be good in football in order to be that anchor the Pac-12 so desperately needs in college football.
Yeah, Larry Scott seemed to run the conference in a way in which he treated all the sports similarly. And in a perfect world, in a fair world that did involve business and the consumer dollar and revenue and all those things, that would be fine. If it was a true student athlete model from the 1920s or sometime in which that wasn't part of reality. But and it's to his credit to a certain extent if it comes from some type of honesty or purity, but it's just not it's just not reality in doing the job that he was called to do and what's best for the conference and the number one sport being football. It's great that the Pac-12 wins the most Olympic sport championships, and that, of course, leads to the title, the Conference of Champions. But when few people care about those sports, as opposed to everybody caring about football and men's basketball, then you need to certainly apply yourself as such. And it just seemed as though, yes, there was no forward thinking when it came to football. It was just schedule the games and we'll sign the TV rights and we'll just go along our merry way. The thing you bring up with Caleb Williams that I find interesting is, and I got to say that it had not really dawned on me, is the conversation surrounding Pac-12 football is just how do the teams get better? How do they recruit better, keep the kids in California? How do they get more attention? Where should they place the games on TV? But when it comes to individual stars, of course, Marcus Mariota was the last Heisman Trophy winner from the Pac-12 in 2014. Christian McCaffrey was close the next season, but it's been pretty dormant in regards to really having star marquee players. Those very few were, of course, at USC, Sam Darnold, etc., the running backs and wide receivers that they've had in the last 4 or 5 years. But yeah, I think that he is the guy that he's at least shown that he's got a creative bent and a marketing and entertainment bent to try to stir up something to gain some attention.
Yeah, and let's, in light of what you've just said, in light of how you kind of set up and are shaping the conversation in a very good way, I might add, that Larry Scott, he had an entertainment background in his own right. He came from the Women's Tennis Association, and he was marketing the WTA tour in the age of Serena and Venus Williams. And so, like he did a fairly good job there, although one could say that if you didn't have Venus and Serena, where would Larry Scott have been? And maybe that was the thing that Pac-12 school presidents and chancellors didn't study enough. That was Scott lifted up by Serena and Venus. But the other main point I wanted to make on that is that, Scott had an entertainment background. He ran a sports entertainment business. So we often attach ourselves to, what are the points on the resume? What are the data points or the components of a person's history in sports administration, in sports marketing? But it's less the data point, right? It's less about, oh, I have this thing on my resume than what's your communication style? What's your leadership style? And so So Kliavkoff was at MGM Resorts. Scott ran the WTA Tour, both in sports entertainment, but two completely different leadership styles, personalities, two completely different sets of awareness in terms of what the job of Pac-12 commissioner required, in terms of how to go about daily business. We saw, this was before I started coming on your show, Mark, that it was revealed, at the start of the pandemic, how lavish Larry Scott's lifestyle was. The offices in San Francisco, having a private suite, just so many ways in which he soaked up money for his own use, comfort, convenience, all while, slashing jobs at Pac-12 Network. I mean, like, what a terrible leader, just in terms of example and in terms of how he related to various people in various walks of life, in terms of managing a conference and managing a conference network, Pac-12 Network. You have to be on good terms with a whole lot of people running this larger operation. You have to build trust, not just with other executives that you hobnob with in a suite, where you have all these, fancy hors d'oeuvres. You have to be able to relate to the people on the ground at the various schools. I mean, that's bread and butter, part of a conference commissioner's job, to be able to relate to a large set of people, to relate to different strata of people with different life experiences. I mean, it very much includes the athletes, of course, athletes coming from very, very different backgrounds relative to what Larry Scott went through. So just to kind of, complete the circle here, they both came, Larry Scott and George Kliavkoff, from sports entertainment backgrounds. They both had points on their resume, but completely different people. And that really is the lesson here, that you look for the communication, you look for the leadership style, you look for the ability to win people over, to gain respect, to earn trust. And that's what George Kliavkoff is doing. Like, that's the secret sauce. It's not so much, head knowledge. It's about being able to take, your knowledge in an industry, but then transfer it to everyday relationships at all levels of the conference. Kliavkoff clearly understands that in a way Larry Scott never did.